All right, Nick, let's talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide. Up and down start to the season so far, but I think this team is on the right track, especially with one player in particular starting to do some really good things. I think this team could be on the turnaround and get things back on track, looking really good for Alabama so far. We'll break it all down here in just 1 second. But first, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, the Crimson Tide, up and down, but they've got some good stuff going for them, especially some things we saw in this past weekend's game. Really good trend for Alabama here. One player in particular doing a really good job, and that is redshirt freshman linebacker QB Reese. Very confusing name, but linebacker QB Reese doing some really, really good stuff, catching the attention of a lot of important people on this team. Let's get into the article and we'll break down some of the data on the other side. So this is from SI.com. It says, talking defensive coordinator Kane Womack on QB Reese says, I think one of the big emphases in the offseason is creating forced fumbles and punching out the ball, and QB did a really nice job of that. Defensive coordinator Kane Womack said, the last takeaway that we got, he did a nice job of coming in there, punching the ball out. Those are things that we chart and practice every day. Saturday marked Reese's first time playing defense in the Crimson and White, and the Birmingham native made the most of his opportunity. Said, yeah, QB was in on 2 takeaways defensively, which was great. Womack said, we've made an emphasis of not just creating takeaways, but trying to score. He had an opportunity to do so, but fell a little bit short there. I think a tight end chased him down, so we kind of got to give him a hard time on that one. Then senior linebacker LT Overton on Reese as well. He says, I don't even see him as a young guy right now. Senior linebacker LT Overton said, he's so active when it comes to speaking to his teammates on the field, communicating, and leading by example. That's what you want to see from a young guy coming in. So a couple things to unpack here. First of all, Womack saying this is a team focusing on getting turnovers, getting takeaways, and trying to make big plays out of them. Seems like QB Reese being in 2 of those plays this past weekend's game really is doing a great job of that, but also seeing him becoming more of a leader from Overton's standpoint, talking about how this guy is really bringing a good, field general's mentality to the linebacker spot. Very good for the future here as well. But first of all, let's break down just how important these turnovers could be for the Crimson Tide. And that leads me to looking at this team last year. And let's look at all defenses in college football last season. This chart shows the bottom how many defensive turnovers a team got versus how they ranked efficiency wise, like how many expected points were added to this team from turnovers. And you can see some of the best teams up at the top there. You see the Texases of the world, you see Notre Dame of the world, a team we thought last year very consistent, made it to the national championship. Right behind them, Alabama last year created a lot of turnovers, which helped this team out tremendously. And I think that cannot be overstated enough. This is a team that really thrived on getting turnovers, takeaways, and it helped them out last year a lot. We can look here just by their grades. This is a defense that ranked 6th last year when they focused on and got a lot of turnovers. This year, though, already they're 57th in defense. Haven't had the guy to come in here and really shake things up, make the turnovers. It's seeming like QB Reese can be that guy going forward. I think we're going to see more of him on the field because of that. And I think the Crimson Tide's defense is going to do a lot of really good things going forward due to that as well. Just a more focus on getting takeaways, turnovers on the defensive side of the ball, led the charge by a new face, QB Reese, coming in and doing a really good job of just that. Curious what your thoughts are on all this, Nick. But before we get to you, Crimson Tide fans, in the comment section below, we're talking about, turnover machines. We're talking about guys that really changed the game when they came into the game. So let us know, who was your all-time game wrecker on defense for the Crimson Tide? Was there someone that was on this defense in history that they could just really turn games around, maybe force turnovers, big play machine, something along those lines? Let us know throughout history who is a game changer on defense for the Crimson Tide. There's a bunch of them in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on everything here with the Tide?
Look, so obviously it was a disastrous start when you look at the Florida State game, and it totally was categorically a disaster. They righted the ship a little bit, you can say, against Louisiana Monroe. I mean, they won 73-0 for just, I mean, look, it counts. It's a big win. It's a win you should get with that kind of result. So again, check in the box, but it doesn't, turn around or negate what happened in Tallahassee. You have to set a statement, I think, this weekend against Wisconsin. I think going forward, they have Georgia, Vanderbilt, then Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma, Eastern Illinois. Little trivia there. That's the where Tony Romo, the famous Cowboys quarterback and CBS analyst, went to school. If anyone's interested, I'm sure you guys are not. Before, of course, ending the season with the Iron Bowl. So this is a gauntlet of a schedule, as the SEC certainly is. And Kalen DeBoer is on a little bit of a hot seat, and they're going to need some better defensive performances. I think Simpson, if we're being honest with ourselves, was always going to have some issues early in the year, right? He's a new starter, right? Things are going to happen on the road against Florida State. They look a completely different team. Credit to Norvell and his staff. It wasn't going to be perfect. I think the first few games of the season, if we're being totally honest with each other, new quarterback, it's going to take a little while to get things going. I think the defensive disappointment in terms of effort, intensity, focus, execution, every single box that was checked in week one that wasn't, right, was such a disaster class. But now you're starting to see new guys come into the fold. And look, this is going to happen. It's one of those things where the expectations are so darn high in Tuscaloosa, as they should be, that any sort of thing that looks just like not elite and dominant or a mediocre performance, as we've seen against Florida State and as we saw at times last year, seems to be a 5-alarm fire. But there's a lot of good pieces here, and there's a lot of young pieces. Remember, this is a transition. Kalen DeBoer came down to the SEC from the West Coast. This is completely different than Nick Saban when he came to Tuscaloosa. He had coached at LSU, right? He knew the territory. He knew what it was like to win in the conference. Kalen DeBoer did not. Last season, the success they had, part of that was him, but it was such a transition with recruiting, getting the right staff, figuring things out. I don't even know if they have all the right staff members right now, to be totally honest. They did a better job this offseason in terms of recruiting in the SEC and the conference and the region, but that's not going to lead to results right away. That's a freshman class. That's part of your freshman class this season. So we're going to see the results, the better recruiting results, the better development results, not till next year and the following season and so on. So we're still in the middle of this transition era. Now, is that any excuse for poor performance? It's not, right? You got to win. You got to win and win in big if you're an Alabama. Otherwise, hit the bricks. I understand that's how it works. But I think there is this hesitancy to see one ugly loss and say, that's it, it's over. And you see an indication here of this young linebacker, QB Reese. It's a guy who's a playmaker. You're starting to see other guys step up. We saw this against Louisiana Monroe. And I wonder over the course of the season if they kind of figure it out and they kind of get settled into a new scheme, new players. Remember, there's a lot of guys that were on this Alabama team that are in the National Football League now that aren't on the team, that were on the team a little bit ago, right? It's a team in flux. We're so used to the Crimson Tide just because for decades they were just the standard of consistency, stability, and elite performance that we kind of just assume they still are that way as a roster. They're not. It's still in flux with Kalen DeBoer year two. I honestly think it won't stabilize till 2 years from now if DeBoer is still there, right? And I think, whether he is there or not remains to be seen, of course, depending on how he does in the win-loss column. But I think you're going to see some new guys pop up and some guys fade away, and then more guys pop up and more guys fade away as this roster stabilizes. Even last year, there were a lot of guys like Jalen Milroe, for example, who was a Saban recruit, was a Saban guy that just was inherited by DeBoer. I think you're going to start to see some more of DeBoer's guys, some of the guys he targeted, have a bigger and bigger role for Alabama going forward, and we'll see how good of a recruiter, how good of a developer Kalen DeBoer is. And I think that's the big thing going forward. When we start seeing more of the recruits that arrived in Tuscaloosa last year, and certainly the freshmen this year and beyond, as they get more playing time, as they get more opportunities, if they become elite level playmakers, hey, that's a good sign for Kalen DeBoer. If DeBoer's guys, DeBoer's dudes, if you will, if they don't step up, okay, that's a reason for concern. And until we hit that moment, and I think we're slowly starting to get there with guys like Reese, I think I'm going to hold off on any severe criticism of Kalen DeBoer. Now, obviously, you can't go like 6-6 or anything like that, right? I'm not going to excuse that. But the reality is, you got to give him time to get his guys into the fold. What Saban did was so legendary, was so unprecedented. Following up a legend like that, it's just not realistic. You're just not going to get it done, not even remotely close. Kalen DeBoer could be a phenomenal coach. He will never even come remotely close to Nick Saban. He will not. Won't happen. The question is going to be if you give him enough time to become a competent coach, to be a coach that can win you maybe another national title. Gene Stallings was never going to be another Bear Bryant, right? but he won a national title, right? So it's one of those things you have to keep in mind. And I still like a lot of what he's doing. There's a lot to be concerned about, but I still think there's a lot of young players that are emerging, a lot of guys stepping up, taking advantage of this sort of volatility, like the saying from the Game of Thrones: chaos isn't a pit, chaos is a ladder. I think we're seeing some guys climb the ladder right now, and I'm very interested to see what they do this weekend against Wisconsin, certainly going into Georgia, and then when they get into the gauntlet of an SEC schedule. This Alabama team was left for dead after week one, but if they can figure out some of these young guys like Reese, I think they could be very dangerous come the home stretch.
Yeah, Nick, and I like the point that you really bring home. Just one game does not make the season. There's a schedule, there's other games down the stretch for a reason. So, it's like you said, I like the pit and ladder analogy here. You got to climb, you got to keep climbing the rungs of that ladder, keep going down the season, and you're not going to know what's going to happen until the end. So, this reminds me like 2 years ago, LSU, Florida State. LSU lost to Florida State first game of the season in 2023 season. And everyone's like, well, this team failure. Well, they didn't get to where they wanted to be, but it was still a pretty good team at the end of the year, a competitive SEC team at least, and we could see the growth and see them keep moving forward. But just because you lose one game at the beginning of the season, I think you're right. We're starting to see, hey, there's a lot of changes made. There's a lot of stuff going on in the offseason for Alabama. There's a lot of good stuff they did. We're starting to see it. We talked about them getting a lot of local guys. QB Reese, Birmingham guy from Alabama, a
Yep.
local guy, really winning the state, getting your good local guys in, getting them involved into the fold here. I think stuff like that is mattering, and we're starting to see it come to fruition here. So let's wait. Let's see what happens. Not guaranteeing that it will happen. Could be a dumpster fire of the season. We all look back when it's 1-12 or whatever, and everyone's like, yep, I knew this was going to happen. We could see that happen. Don't think that's what's going to happen, but we're starting to see some things, some signs that this season is not all for loss. So do not give up hope. I think guys like QB Reese are going to come to light, and we're going to see the plan, everything that was coming together for Kalen DeBoer and this Alabama team.